She stepped in on a weekday evening that felt louder than it sounded, the kind of night where cutlery clicks turn into tiny verdicts. Hannah had ironed the same pearl-colored dress 3 times and still found a stray thread along the hem. She pinched it flat and told herself not to pull. The host smiled, checked the list, and led her to a two-top by the window where the light hit like a spotlight that hadn't decided if it was kind or cruel. She set her purse on her lap light as a whisper, heavy as a life, and glanced at the time. Early, on purpose. She breathed through the nerves and pressed her palm against the quiet panic that always lived just beneath her ribs. 15 minutes, she told herself. If he's late, it's okay. If he's not real, it's okay. If this is another joke, I leave with dignity. The number folded in her purse, $5. A safety pin of a budget pricked her thoughts. She straightened and pretended the water tasted like confidence. At the next table, a man in a charcoal suit checked his phone once and then ignored it like a boundary. Daniel watched the host seat her, watched the way the girl's eyes kept finding the door and then scolding themselves for it. He wasn't in the mood to analyze people tonight. He'd promised himself 1 quiet hour before going home to a stack of bedtime books and a request for the silly bare voice. But the girl's posture kept telling a story she tried to hide. The staff knew him here as polite and private, the guy who ordered simple and tipped well and left before dessert. Tonight his fork grazed an untouched plate as he counted the minutes for a stranger. 20, 25, 30. He caught the flinch when her phone buzzed. He didn't read the text, didn't need to. He recognized the drop in her shoulders, the quick throat clear, the performance of being fine. And then because the universe has timing like a mischievous drummer, a raised voice flared near the bar, a dispute over a reservation. A guy cut through the dining room with the entitled energy of someone who thought lines were for other people, and be right back was a permanent excuse. He reached Hannah's table with a half grin that never reached his eyes. "Brandon," he said, not quite asking. "Traffic. You look different than your pictures." Hannah blinked once, slow, and chose not to apologize for existing. "Hi," she said, because manners had kept her afloat more times than money. The host, mortified, hovered to confirm he was indeed the name on the reservation was, technically, which only made it worse. Brandon dropped into the chair as if the air owed him support and snapped 2 fingers at a server. "Make it quick. I'm squeezing you in between meetings," he said, and the word meetings carried the perfume of a lie. He glanced at her dress and smirked. Vintage? Brave choice. Hannah folded the napkin in her lap and kept her voice even. "I can order tea." He laughed. "Relax, I'll cover it if you don't go weird." The server arrived, patient, professional. Brandon ordered for himself and then for her without asking, something heavy and expensive with a side of performance. Daniel felt the old heat rise in his chest, the heat of watching someone take up space they hadn't earned. He signaled the manager with a subtle nod, the kind that meant "I'll fix it, please don't escalate." The manager, relieved, drifted away to guard the edges of the room. Hannah's phone lit. Another text from Brandon, sent earlier than he arrived, hovering like a ghost above the present. A bet with friends. A let's see if she actually shows. A screenshot of her profile with a laughing reaction. Her breath hitched. The rehook pulled tight. This wasn't just a bad date. It was a dared humiliation wearing cologne. "Bathroom," Hannah said softly, standing before her face cracked. She made it to the corridor past the kitchen doors and gripped the cool tile with one palm. In the mirror, she found a girl who looked like she could survive most things as long as she had a minute to think. She gave herself that minute. Outside, a tray pivoted too hard near the pass someone called corner, and a glass exploded on tile, the noise sharp enough to turn heads and churn adrenaline. Brandon clapped once, mocking. Daniel stood, not to dramatize, just to shift the scene. He crossed to the host's stand and murmured a request that sounded like a favor owed but not demanded. When Hannah returned, he was already back at his table, a small plate and a lemonade sliding onto hers a heartbeat later. From the kitchen, the server said gently, "On the house." Brandon rolled his eyes. "Cute. Anyway, I'm double parked," he said, pushing back his chair. "Send me your number. Maybe I'll text if I'm bored." He tossed a bill onto the table like a tip to the universe for tolerating him and sauntered out, shoulder-checking a chair on the way. The door chimed. Silence stretched. Somewhere, a fork landed carefully on porcelain. as if the room was trying to apologize to itself. "It isn't charity," Daniel said without standing, voice calm, aimed at the surface of the table more than at her pride. Hannah looked over, not trusting kindness from strangers, but too tired to swat it away. "It's triage. Eat first. Decide everything else with blood sugar." A small, unwilling laugh escaped her. She sat, hands still, eyes clear. "I'm fine," she lied politely. "You're allowed not to be," he answered, then looked back at his plate, granting her the safety of not being watched. She took a slow sip, the lemonade bright enough to remind her taste buds what hope felt like. Her phone buzzed one more time, another message from Brandon, something vulgar wrapped as sarcasm, and she hit block. A clean, soundless click that felt like walking out of a room you don't know. "I'm Daniel," he said finally, offering the name like a handshake he didn't need her to take. "Hannah," she said, surprised she'd answered. He nodded toward the near miss at the kitchen. "You'd be good in an emergency," he said. "You measured before you moved." She frowned lightly. "You don't know me." "I know tells," he said, "and I know someone who shows up even when it costs them." She held his gaze for a second. Then the server reappeared with a subtle glance that meant your check is already handled and we are trying to give you dignity. Hannah's throat worked. "Thank you," she said, not to the receipt, not to the lemonade, but to the space she'd been granted to breathe. The dining room's murmur returned to its normal hum, but the energy had shifted like weather turning on a coin. At the bar, a loud laugh popped too close to a hanging fixture and set it swaying. A busser reached up to steady it, misjudged the chain, and the fixture tilted hard. A cascade of tiny bulbs flickered, one sparked, and half the room gasped as darkness hiccuped across the ceiling. The manager killed the circuit, snapped for a fire blanket, and the kitchen's shout echoed through the pass. Smoke, thin and impatient, stretched into the air above the service door. "Everyone stay calm," someone said with the practiced urgency of a person who'd rehearsed this speech in staff meetings. Daniel rose before the sentence finished. He wasn't a firefighter, wasn't a hero, it wasn't that, but crisis had a way of turning him efficient. He stepped into the corridor, eyes scanning exits, counting beats. Hannah watched his silhouette cut between tables and felt that strange settling you get when someone competent moves first. A child at a four-top started to wail. Hannah crossed to kneel eye level, hands clear, voice steady. "It's okay, sweetheart. Look at me." The crying hitched, then eased. The smoke alarm didn't trip small mercy. The kitchen door burst open with a puff of steam, and a cook fanned the air with a sheet pan, sheepish, calling out that it was handled. Laughter nervous, grateful rippled, and the power flicked back. The room exhaled in one piece. Hannah returned to her table, pulse tapping at her throat, and found a small, neat card tucked beside her glass. Not dramatic, not romantic, practical. A name she already knew, a number, and 4 words written in tidy print. Coffee, not company. Tuesdays. She stared at it for a second too long, then slid it into her purse between the $5 and a bus pass. On impulse, she glanced toward the door, where Daniel had paused as if debating whether to say more or leave the moment dignified. He chose the latter, offered a nod that felt like agreement rather than goodbye, and reached for the handle. The door chimed again, and Brandon reappeared with a grin, swagger restored, holding up a phone like a trophy. "Forgot my keys," he said. Except he was dangling Hannah's purse charm from his finger, the little brass feather she'd had since she was 16. He twirled it once, smirking. "Cute. You drop things when you're nervous." Hannah's face went still. Her purse was on her lap. The charm wasn't. The room seemed to tilt as memory shuffled. The shoulder check on the chair, the way his hand brushed the table edge, the casual theft disguised as clumsiness. Brandon winked. "Say please," he said lightly, "and maybe I'll dash." Brandon's grin lingered, light as smoke, but edged like steel. "Say please," he repeated, as if the word itself was a game. Hannah rose slowly, keeping her voice steady before it could crack. "That belongs to me." Daniel didn't move from his chair. He simply turned his head toward the host with the faintest look. Within seconds, one of the security staff was making his way from the bar. Daniel's tone was calm, almost conversational. "Put the charm down and walk out. No more attention than you've already taken." Brandon chuckled, loud enough for the whole room. "Attention is the point," he said, twirling the chain once more around his finger. "Maybe if you say please and dash." Hannah didn't reach for it. Instead, She pulled out her phone, pressed record, and aimed the lens at his face. "You're on video," she said flatly. "And there are 4 cameras above you." She pointed upward. One of them really was there. Brandon's smirk faltered for half a second. The guard drew closer. Daniel still hadn't stood. He only spoke 2 words, firm and low. "Enough." Now, it wasn't loud, but it carried like an order. Brandon's eyes cut toward him, narrowed, and something clicked in recognition. "Oh," he drawled, like solving a puzzle. "So you're that Daniel." "Doesn't matter who I am," Daniel replied. "Give it back." Brandon's mouth twisted. "It matters to your board, Mr. Quiet." He dropped the charm onto the table with a metallic clink, but as he left, he shoved his shoulder hard against Daniel's chair, deliberate friction. Hannah started to move forward, but Daniel gave the smallest shake of his head. The guard escorted Brandon toward the exit. At the door he turned, smirking. "Tell your sitter to lock her windows," he said with a lazy whistle. "Cute kid." The bell above the door chimed. Then he was gone. The words hung heavy over the table like a live wire. Hannah's stomach clenched cold. What did he mean? Daniel finally stood, his breath measured. "He means he wanted the last word," he said evenly, though something shadowed the edges of his eyes. "You have a child," Hannah said, not a question, but a realization finding its place. Daniel dipped his head. "Mia? She's 4. Silence pressed close. Then he nodded toward the card he'd left. "Tuesdays. Coffee. No pressure. But if someone bothers you again, call me." Hannah's fingers curled around the charm, warm now against her palm, her pulse slowing as if it had borrowed its steadiness. "Thank you," she said, clearer this time. Daniel paused for half a breath. "Eat," he said, not smiling, not pitying, simply suggesting. "Decisions are better with food." She sat back down, took a bite. Flavor returned. The world reassembled itself. From the door, a draft rattled the glass pendants above, a tremor like an afterthought. She tucked the card into her purse, looked up. Daniel was already gone. On the empty plate he'd left behind, the server had scrawled in blue ink, "You're settled." Relief had just begun to seep in when Hannah noticed the chain already clasped to her wrist, her feather charm dangling safely at the end. But hanging from it now was a slip of paper, folded sharp. She opened it with trembling fingers. 3 words, written in a familiar hand. "Nice block." Outside, through the restaurant's front glass, she caught her reflection, and just beyond it, at the corner of the street, a shadow waited, still as stone. The slip of paper trembled in Hannah's hand, as if the ink itself carried heat. She folded it fast, sliding it back into her purse before anyone else could see. The restaurant hummed again with clinking glasses and low laughter, but to her it all sounded muffled, like she was underwater. Her eyes darted to the window, where the figure leaned half in shadow. He wasn't moving, just waiting. That was worse than any sudden lunge. She gripped the edge of the table and forced herself to breathe. 5 slow counts in, 5 counts out. She couldn't afford panic. Panic cost more than she had. The server returned to check on her, but Hannah shook her head gently, managing a polite smile. "I'm fine," she lied. The words scratched her throat like sand. She gathered her things, her purse light but suddenly heavy with meaning, and slipped from the booth. Each step toward the exit felt like walking into a dare. The bell chimed overhead when she pushed the door open. Cool air rushed her face. She paused on the sidewalk, scanning quickly left, then right. The corner shadow was gone. Relief threatened to wash her knees out, but instinct screamed, "Not gone." Shifted. Her phone buzzed, lighting up her hand. Unknown number. A single message glowed on the screen, "Nice trick inside, but games end outside." She froze. Her thumb hovered over the block button, then faltered. Blocking didn't erase presence. She looked up just in time to see a black car ease out from a side street, window rolled down halfway. A familiar grin flashed from behind the wheel before the car melted into traffic. Brandon. He hadn't left, he had only adjusted the stage. She rushed toward the bus stop, her heels clicking fast. The charm dug into her wrist with every swing of her arm, as if reminding her she wasn't entirely defenseless. She slid onto the first seat she found, heart still galloping, and pressed her forehead against the cool glass. Across the street, she thought she saw him again. No, she knew she did, leaning casually against a lamppost, watching her bus pull away. The city blurred past, lights stretching into streaks, but she couldn't shake the weight of his stare. At the next stop, someone tapped her shoulder. She spun so fast she almost cried out, but it was only the driver calling back. "End of the line, miss." She blinked. She'd been so lost in thought that she hadn't noticed the bus had emptied. Outside, night had thickened, the kind that turned windows into mirrors and alleys into open mouths. Hannah stepped down onto the pavement, clutching her purse strapped tight. The bus roared off, leaving her in silence. And there, half a block ahead, leaning under a dead streetlight, was Brandon's silhouette. He tilted his head, mocking a bow, then raised his phone and snapped a picture with the flash on. The burst of white seared her vision. When it cleared, he was already stepping back into the dark, leaving only the echo of his laugh. The flash still burned behind Hannah's eyes, a ghost light that refused to fade. She stumbled back a step, clutching her bag as if leather straps could shield her. The empty street hummed with a silence that felt staged, like the pause before a curtain drops. She forced herself to move, her heels striking the pavement in quick, sharp beats. Each echo chased her, folding into the rhythm of her own pulse. Her phone buzzed again. She flinched before daring to look. Another unknown message. "Pretty brave tonight. Let's see how long that lasts." Her thumb hovered over block but trembled away. She shoved the phone deep into her purse and kept walking, eyes sweeping the darkened storefronts. Somewhere far off, music leaked from a bar, laughter spilling into the night like a cruel reminder that other people were safe, distracted, unthreatened. She wasn't. A sudden scrape behind her. She spun. Nothing but an overturned trash bin rolling in the breeze. She took one step backward, then froze. From the corner of her eye, a shadow detached itself from the alley wall. Brandon. He stepped into the glow of a flickering street lamp, clapping slow, deliberate. "Not bad," he drawled. "You've got some fight. Almost made me believe you weren't terrified." His smile stretched, but his eyes never warmed. Almost. Her chest tightened, but she kept her chin high. "You've had your fun. It ends here." The words shook, but they were words. He laughed low. "Ends? Oh, sweetheart. This is where things start." He slipped his phone into his pocket, both hands free now, palms casual but ready. Hannah backed up a step. "Stay away from me." Brandon's head tilted. "Or what? You'll record me again? Send it to the cops? Go ahead. By the time they care, we'll already be acquainted." Before fear could paralyze her, a car horn blared down the block. Headlights flooded the street, washing Brandon in sudden brightness. He cursed, shielding his eyes. The car slowed, then pulled to the curb. The window rolled down. Daniel's voice, low and steady, cut through the night. "Get in, Hannah." Her legs moved before her mind caught up. She yanked the door open and slid inside. Brandon took one step forward, but Daniel leaned across the seat, his stare sharp as glass. "Walk away," he ordered. Brandon's smile faltered, but only for a moment. He raised his hands in mock surrender, backing into shadow again. "Cute rescue," he sneered. "You'll regret it." Then he melted back into the alley. Daniel hit the lock, tires squealing as he pulled away. Hannah's breath came in sharp gasps, her body trembling. He kept his eyes on the road, jaw tight, silence heavy. "Finally," she managed. "How did you dash?" "I never left," he said shortly. "Saw him follow you out." His grip on the wheel flexed white. "You're not safe on your own now." Hannah swallowed, voice small. "Why is he doing this?" Daniel's answer was a whisper she almost missed. "Because of me." Shadows sliced past the windows, but none darker than the one those words cast between them. The car sped through the quiet streets, every traffic light flashing by too fast to notice. Hannah gripped the seatbelt across her chest like it was a lifeline. Her breath was uneven, but her mind sharper now, clinging to one truth. Brandon hadn't chosen her at random. Daniel's words echoed because of me. She turned toward him, voice low but steady. "What does he want from you?" Daniel's jaw flexed. For a long moment, he didn't answer. His hands tightened around the steering wheel, knuckles pale in the glow of the dashboard. Finally, he exhaled. "He used to work under one of our contracts. Short-term, low-level. He got caught cutting corners, risking safety codes. I shut him out. He lost more than a job, he lost his leverage. Men like him, they don't forgive. They linger." His eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, scanning the empty road like it might sprout shadows. "And now he's using you to get to me." Hannah shook her head. "I don't even know you. Why drag me into this?" Daniel's voice softened, but it wasn't comfort, it was resignation. "Because you sat at that table. Because I noticed. And he noticed that I noticed. Silence pressed in. Hannah turned to the window, her reflection pale, unfamiliar. She felt like her life had been hijacked mid-sentence, rewritten into someone else's plot. Daniel pulled into a quiet parking lot, killed the engine, and turned to face her. I'll take you home if you want. But you need to know he won't stop at one scare. Not after tonight. Hannah's pulse hammered. So what do you suggest? I just vanish. His eyes searched hers, steady but tired. No, you live your life. But not alone. Not until he's done circling. His words carried a certainty that frightened her more than Brandon's smirk. Before she could reply, her phone buzzed again. She pulled it out with trembling hands. Another message, the number still unknown. Nice getaway. But headlights don't shine forever. Attached was a photo her silhouette in the bus window earlier, face half-turned, vulnerable. Hannah's stomach dropped. She hadn't seen anyone close enough to take it. Daniel leaned over, eyes narrowing as he saw the screen. He swore under his breath, then started the car again. Where are we going? She whispered. His answer was clipped, decisive. Somewhere he can't follow. Somewhere you'll meet the reason I can't let this go. He merged back onto the road, headlights slicing through the dark. Hannah clutched her purse tighter, the charm warm against her wrist. She didn't ask again, but as they drove deeper into the night, a question louder than all the rest crowded her chest. What exactly was waiting for her on the other side of this road? The road stretched empty, its painted lines catching flashes of the headlights like broken signals. Hannah sat rigid, every bump in the pavement rattling through her bones. Daniel's silence was heavier than the dark outside. Finally, he pulled into a narrow drive, headlights sweeping across a modest house tucked back from the street. The porch light glowed faint, steady. He cut the engine. Before Hannah could ask, the front door creaked open. A little girl padded out, her hair messy from sleep, clutching a stuffed bear. Daddy. Her voice was soft, questioning. Hannah froze. The tension in Daniel's shoulders loosened the moment he stepped out of the car. It's okay, Mia. Back inside, sweetheart. But Mia spotted Hannah and tilted her head. Who's that? Hannah swallowed, suddenly aware of how out of place she was. Daniel crouched to his daughter's level, his voice gentler than she'd ever heard. Someone who helped me tonight. Mia blinked, then whispered something that made Hannah's skin prickle. She looks like Mommy. The words hung in the air, fragile and heavy at once. Daniel's breath caught. His hand trembled as he smoothed Mia's hair. Bedtime. Angel, he murmured, voice cracking. Mia hugged her bear tighter and disappeared back inside, the door closing with a hush. Hannah stood on the gravel, the weight of the night pressing hard. You should have told me, she said quietly. Daniel's gaze locked with hers, raw and unguarded now. I don't tell people because they use it. They twist it. Brandon knows too much already. If he ever found out about Mia Dash, his voice broke off, throat tight. He looked at Hannah as if she was both danger and salvation. That's why I couldn't just watch you leave that restaurant. You don't get it. He would have taken your humiliation and turned it into a weapon against both of us. The air was so still it seemed to listen. Hannah's heart pounded. She had walked into that evening with $5 and hope so thin it tore in her hands. Now she was standing in a stranger's driveway, staring at the truth that her life had already twisted into his. Daniel stepped closer, not threatening, not pleading, just present. I can't promise this ends clean, he admitted, but I can promise I'll stand between him and you, and between him and her. His hand trembled once, then steadied. If you'll let me. For a long moment, Hannah didn't move. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out the feather charm, the tiny chain still warm from her skin. She pressed it into his palm. Then we fight back, she whispered. A sound broke the silence, a car engine, low and distant, crawling down the street. Both their heads snapped toward the dark road. Headlights flared at the far end, inching closer, too slow to be casual. Brandon hadn't given up. He had only just begun.